It was a moonless night, and the darkness cloaked the world like a heavy shroud. Chester, a weary traveler, found himself on a desolate road, surrounded by towering trees that seemed to whisper secrets in the chilly wind. His headlights cut through the obscurity, revealing only a narrow path ahead. Chester had embarked on this nocturnal journey to visit an old friend in a distant town. The directions he'd received were vague, and as he delved deeper into the heart of the unknown, a sense of unease settled over him like a thick fog. The only sounds were the distant howling of a lone wolf and the rhythmic hum of his car's engine. As he drove, Chester noticed peculiar shadows dancing at the periphery of his vision. He dismissed them as mere figments of his tired imagination, attributing the eerie atmosphere to the late hour. However, an unshakable feeling of being watched gnawed at him. The road seemed to stretch on endlessly, with no signs of civilization in sight. Chester's anxiety grew, and he contemplated turning back, but a strange curiosity propelled him forward. The trees closed in, their branches intertwining above the road, creating a canopy that swallowed the feeble glow of his headlights. Suddenly, his car sputtered, and the engine died. Panic set in as Chester fumbled for his phone, only to find there was no signal. He stepped out into the oppressive silence, the darkness now so dense that it seemed to press against his skin. As he lifted the hood, he heard faint footsteps approaching from the shadows. Every instinct screamed at him to flee, but curiosity held him captive. The footsteps drew closer, revealing a figure in the dim light. It was an old man, hunched and clad in tattered clothing. "Need some help, son?" the old man croaked, his voice carrying an otherworldly cadence. Relieved, Chester explained his predicament. The old man offered assistance, claiming to know a nearby mechanic. Chester hesitated, but ultimately agreed to follow the stranger into the woods, the darkness swallowing them whole. The narrow path led deeper into the forest, the only guide being the flickering lantern the old man carried. Chester couldn't shake the feeling that the trees were closing in on them, their twisted branches forming grotesque silhouettes against the inky sky. The old man spoke cryptically, weaving tales of the woods and the secrets hidden within. Chester's discomfort grew, his mind playing tricks on him with each rustle of leaves and distant creaking. The air itself seemed charged with an unsettling energy. As they walked, the path became less defined, and Chester questioned the old man about the mechanic. The old man simply smiled, revealing yellowed teeth, and muttered, "Patience, young one. We're almost there." Eventually, they'd reached a clearing where an ancient-looking cottage stood, its windows aglow with an otherworldly light. Chester's unease intensified, but the promise of help compelled him forward. The old man knocked on the door, and it swung open without a sound. Inside, the air was heavy with an oppressive stillness. Chester noticed odd symbols etched into the walls, and a sense of foreboding settled over him. The old man gestured for Chester to wait while he disappeared into the shadows. Minutes passed like hours, and just as Chester considered leaving, the old man returned with news of the mechanic. He claimed the man lived deeper in the forest, but would be there shortly. Chester hesitated, but his desperation for assistance overshadowed his growing fear. As they waited, the cottage seemed to come alive with whispers that echoed through the air. Chester strained to understand the words, but they eluded him like fleeting shadows. The old man, seemingly unperturbed, continued muttering to himself, oblivious to the growing tension. Just as Chester was about to insist on leaving, a distant sound pierced the silence, the unmistakable rumble of an approaching vehicle. Relief washed over him, but it was short-lived. The headlights revealed not a mechanic, but a group of shadowy figures emerging from the darkness. Chester's heart pounded in his chest as the figures approached, their faces concealed by the darkness. The old man's demeanor changed, a sinister glint in his eyes revealing a malevolence that sent shivers down Chester's spine. Panic surged within him, urging him to flee, but the encroaching figures surrounded him, blocking any escape. The leader of the group, a tall figure draped in a tattered cloak, spoke in a low, guttural voice. "Welcome, Chester. We've been expecting you." A cold sweat broke out on Chester's forehead as he demanded an explanation. The old man cackled, his voice now a haunting melody that echoed through the cottage. "You stumbled upon our realm, dear traveler, and now you must pay the toll." Chester's mind raced, searching for a way out. He was trapped, surrounded by an otherworldly presence that seemed to feed on fear. The leader revealed the true nature of their sinister gathering, recounting tales of lost souls who ventured into the woods, never to return. As the story unfolded, Chester realized the old man was no savior, but a harbinger of the supernatural. The symbols on the walls, the eerie whispers, all part of a dark ritual that now included him. Desperation fueled his resolve, and he made a daring dash for the door. The figures moved with unnatural speed, blocking his path. The old man's laughter echoed, mocking Chester's futile attempt to escape. The cottage seemed to warp and twist, its walls closing in on him. Chester's breath quickened, and his surroundings blurred as if reality itself was unraveling. Just as despair threatened to consume him, a blinding light enveloped the cottage. A voice, distant yet reassuring, echoed in Chester's mind, guiding him through the ethereal chaos. The figures recoiled, their malevolence unable to withstand the purity of the light. Chester found himself outside the cottage, the forest eerily silent once more. The leader and his followers vanished like specters, leaving only the old man, now a feeble figure muttering to himself. The blinding light lingered for a moment before fading, leaving Chester bewildered in the moonlit clearing. With cautious steps, Chester retraced his path through the woods, the night no longer conspiring against him. The trees whispered, but their secrets were now distant echoes. As he reached his stranded car, he found it miraculously restored to working order. With the memory of the supernatural ordeal etched into his mind, Chester sped away from the haunted woods, the road unfolding before him like a sanctuary. The night, once an oppressive force, now held a newfound appreciation for the light of day. As Chester's car disappeared into the distance, the old man emerged from the cottage, his eyes reflecting an ancient sorrow. The woods, with their secrets and malevolent spirits, returned to their timeless slumber, waiting for the next unsuspecting traveler to venture into their realm. The air was crisp as Oliver and his girlfriend, Emily, set out on their long-awaited road trip. Their bags were packed, and the excitement was palpable. The plan was simple: drive through the night and reach a cozy cabin nestled in the woods. Little did they know, their journey would take a sinister turn. As they navigated the winding roads, the glow of the city lights faded, leaving them surrounded by an inky blackness broken only by the headlights of their car. The isolation was unsettling, but Oliver dismissed it as a natural part of the adventure. The couple chatted, laughter echoing in the quiet night, blissfully unaware of the eyes watching from the shadows. Hours passed, and fatigue began to set in. Emily rested her head against the window, lulled by the rhythmic hum of the engine. Oliver, determined to press on, noticed a pair of headlights in the rearview mirror. He dismissed it as a fellow traveler, but a seed of unease planted itself in his mind. The mysterious vehicle stayed in pursuit, maintaining a constant distance. Oliver tried to shake off the feeling, convincing himself it was mere coincidence. However, as they continued through the night, the headlights remained a constant, haunting presence. As the clock struck midnight, Oliver decided to take a detour, hoping to lose their unseen follower. The road became increasingly desolate, winding through dense woods. Anxiety crept into their hearts, and the once warm atmosphere turned cold. Suddenly, the headlights behind them disappeared. Oliver and Emily exchanged a glance, relief washing over them. Little did they know, the worst was yet to come. The detour led them deeper into the woods, far from the safety of the main road. A dense fog enveloped the surroundings, shrouding the path ahead in an eerie mist. Oliver's knuckles turned white as he gripped the steering wheel, uncertainty etched on his face. As they pressed on, The road became narrower, the trees towering like silent sentinels. Emily's earlier cheerfulness had waned, replaced by a growing sense of foreboding. The car's headlights struggled to pierce the thick fog, creating an otherworldly atmosphere that sent shivers down their spines. With each passing mile, unease transformed into palpable fear. Oliver's gaze darted between the road and the rearview mirror, half expecting the mysterious vehicle to reappear. Emily clutched the edges of her seat, her eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of danger. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, standing in the middle of the road. Oliver slammed on the brakes, the car skidding to a halt. Their hearts raced as the headlights illuminated a man, his face obscured by the fog. "Help," he rasped, his voice echoing through the silence. "They're coming." Oliver hesitated, torn between empathy and caution. Emily pleaded with him to drive away, but something in the stranger's eyes struck a chord. Against better judgment, Oliver unlocked the doors, allowing the man to climb into the back seat. As they continued the journey, the stranger spoke of a group of malevolent pursuers, a cult with sinister intentions. The fog thickened, and visibility dwindled to almost nothing. The sense of being watched returned, intensifying the fear that gripped their hearts. The stranger guided them through a labyrinthine network of roads, claiming it was the only way to escape the cult's grasp. The once soothing hum of the engine now felt like a countdown to an unknown horror. Unbeknownst to Oliver and Emily, the cult had not given up the chase. In the oppressive darkness, they were closing in, their malevolent whispers carrying through the fog like a prelude to unspeakable terror. The stranger directed Oliver down an increasingly treacherous path, the narrow road snaking through the dense forest. The oppressive silence was broken only by the occasional hoot of an owl or the rustling of leaves in the wind. Emily's unease grew, but the stranger insisted they were almost free from the clutches of the cult. As the minutes turned into hours, the stranger's directions became more convoluted. Oliver's sense of direction wavered, and the fog seemed to play tricks on their minds. The headlights now cut through the mist in feeble attempts to reveal the road ahead, but uncertainty hung in the air like a thick fog of its own. Just when they thought they might escape, the ominous sound of distant chanting reached their ears. Panic set in. Emily begged Oliver to turn back, but the stranger urged them to press on. "They'll catch us if we stop," he muttered, his eyes wild with fear. The road twisted and turned, becoming more obscure with each passing moment. Oliver's heart raced as the chanting grew louder, echoing through the woods like a macabre symphony. Shadows danced on the periphery of the headlights, creating grotesque figures that seemed to materialize and dissipate in the fog. In a clearing ahead, they spotted a dilapidated structure. The stranger insisted it was a safe haven, a place to regroup and plan their next move. Against their better judgment, Oliver steered the car toward the eerie building. As they approached, the headlights revealed an abandoned church, its windows shattered, and the doors hanging from rusty hinges. The stranger hastily exited the car, urging Oliver and Emily to follow. The chanting had now reached a fever pitch, the cult drawing near. Within the church, the air was thick with the scent of decay. The stranger led them to a hidden chamber, concealed behind a tattered tapestry. "Wait here," he whispered, disappearing into the shadows. Time stretched into an agonizing wait. The distant chanting was now replaced by hushed murmurs, the cult members strategizing their next move. Oliver and Emily exchanged anxious glances, trapped in a nightmarish situation with no clear escape. Just as their nerves reached a breaking point, the stranger returned with a weathered map. He pointed to a remote trail leading away from the church, claiming it was the only route to elude the cult. The decision weighed heavily on Oliver as he considered the stranger's reliability, but with the cult closing in, they had little choice. As they ventured back into the night, the fog clung to them like a malevolent force. The distant echoes of the cult's pursuit persisted, a relentless reminder that their ordeal was far from over.